Welcome, bienvenidos, benvindu, to the Soccermetrics Copa LIbertadores show, part of the SDH network. The only English language show devoted to South America's premier club competition. I'm your host, Howard Hamilton, the founder of Soccermetrics. We're done now with the second preliminary round, and we are down to the 8 teams who will fight it out for the last 4 berths in this season's CONMEBOL LIbertadores group stage. And this has been, I gotta say, the most dramatic week of Libertadores football we've seen in some time. And it's really important to recognize it's just a preliminary round. We have had last-minute goals. We have had dramatic events involving both teams. We have had penalty kick shootouts. We've had unexpected teams advancing to the last 8. And in this episode, I'll recap the 8 matches that made up the second legs of the second preliminary round. But before all of that, we start with the conclusion of the Copa Sudamericana, which was no less dramatic. And the Copa Sudamericana is the South American equivalent of the UEFA Super Cup. It is an encounter between last season's champions of the Libertadores and the Copa Sudamericana. Last week, Lanús, the winners of the Sudamericana, won the first leg 1-0. The series moved to the Maracanã, where Flamengo, last season's Libertadores winners, would host. And it was an absolutely dramatic, crazy, wild encounter. Lanús would extend their aggregate lead in the 29th minute when Rodrigo Castillo, who scored the lone goal in the first leg, overcame Rossi, who was way off his line. I mean, not just way off his line, he was at the center line. And he overcame Rossi and rolled the ball in from 45 meters out. And I mean literally rolled the ball in. It was a very well executed goal. Flamengo would get a lifeline about 8 minutes later when, after a handball in the area by Remigio Carrera, Georgian de Arrasqueta, the ever-reliable de Arrasqueta, who was such a fundamental player last season, South American Player of the Year, scored a penalty to level the night at 1 and give Flamengo a lifeline at 2-1. They would level the aggregate score in the 85th minute on another penalty. Flamengo made a foray into the Lanús penalty area, meat in the sandwich incident, or bundled over. Whatever way you choose to look at it, the referee called a penalty. Jorginho stepped up to the penalty spot, and he executed perfectly to give Flamengo the 2-1 lead and 2-2 on aggregate. The result of that was 30 minutes of free soccer. The Copa Sudamericana goes to extra time and then to penalties if the aggregate score is level. And the match progressed up to the 118th minute when Lanús had a corner kick. Jose Canale, the Paraguayan defender for Lanús, executed a wonderfully snapped header off the corner kick to give Lanús the 2-2 tie and 3-2 on aggregate. And then in the second minute of stoppage time in the second half extra period, so 120 plus 2, Flamengo were pushing forward for the aggregate equalizer. Dylan Aquino won the ball at the midline. He raced toward the final 18. He rounded Rossi, overcame the Flamengo defenders who were scrambling to cover back, and scored 3-2 to Lanús on the night, 4-2 on the aggregate. They win the Copa Sudamericana. It's the second year in a row that an Argentine side has won the Recopa. Racing Club won it last season. Lanús wins it in 2026. An absolutely crazy conclusion to the Recopa and the perfect curtain raiser to the South American club football season. And now moving on to the Libertadores second preliminary round. Second leg, starting with the classified results. And in track 1, Guarani 1, Juventud 2. Juventud advanced 2-1 in aggregate. Independiente Medellin 0, Liverpool de Montevideo 0. Independiente Medellin advanced 2-1 in aggregate. Track 2, Deportes Tolima 0, Deportivo Táchira 1. Tied 1-1 in aggregate, Deportivo Tolima advanced 3-0 on penalties. Bahia 2, O'Higgins 1, tied 2-2 on aggregate. O'Higgins advanced 4-3 on penalties. Track 3, Sporting Cristal 0, Segunda de Mayo 0, 2-2 tie on aggregate. Sporting Cristal advanced 5-4 on penalties. Huachipato 1, Carabobo 2. Carabobo advanced 3-1 on aggregate. Track 4, Argentinos Juniors 0, Barcelona Sporting Club 1. Tied 1-1 on aggregate, Barcelona advanced 5-4 on penalties. And Botafogo 2, Nacional Potosí 0. Botafogo advanced 2-1 on aggregate. So recapping the matches of this week, we saw 13 goals scored, resulting in 2 home wins, 2 draws, and 4 incredible away wins. And now let's move to the featured matches of this week. And the featured matches were in track 4, Argentinos Juniors versus Barcelona, and Botafogo hosting Nacional Potosí. First, Argentinos Juniors versus Barcelona. And Argentinos were forced to make one change with the sending off of Francisco Alvarez in the first leg. And Nicolas Diaz, manager of Argentinos, took out Thomas Molina, so a total of 2 changes. They lined up in 4-4-2, with Brian Cortez as the goalkeeper, Sebastian Prieto, Eric Godoy, Roman Riquelme, that's a famous name in Argentinos Juniors history, Leandro Lozano as the defensive line, Emiliano Viveros, Nicolas Oroz, Federico Fattori, moving from his holy midkeeper role to the midfield, and Alan Lescano on the wings. And the forward line, Hernan Lopez Munoz and Diego Porcel, who scored in the first leg. Cesar Farias, manager of Barcelona, made 4 changes and a formation change as well. Lining up in the 4-2-3-1, Barcelona went out with Jose Contreras in goal, Gustavo Vallecilla, Alex Rangel, Javier Baez, Brian Carabali in defense, Johnny Quinones, Milton Celis as defensive midfield. At the forward midfield, Jonathan Mina, Joao Rojas, Brian Castillo, and the lone striker, Dario Benedetto. Argentina started out this match brightly, and it looked like they had a chokehold on the tie when Nicolas Oroz scored a goal in the 14th minute. Unfortunately for Argentinos, that goal would be disallowed because of a handball by Emiliano Viveros in the build-up, actually in the crossing play that sent the ball over to Oroz to convert. It was the right call, but it was also a call that noticeably deflated Argentinos' efforts in the forward half of the field. And it was a play that allowed Barcelona to build themselves back into the game. And eventually, with 20 minutes to play, actually 25 minutes to play, Barcelona would gain a lifeline. They would get a huge lifeline through Johnny Quinones. He was hovering outside the area. The ball was circulated to him, and he executed a perfect right-footed strike past the Argentinos goalkeeper Cortez to give Barcelona the 1-0 lead and level the tie at 1-1. Terrific strike by the ex-Independiente player. The match would end Barcelona 1, Argentinos Juniors 0, and penalty kicks loomed. Barcelona shooting first would execute on their first 3 penalty kicks. Argentinos would successfully convert their penalty kicks as well through Lescano, Lopez Munoz, and Lozano. The 4th round was where all the drama started. Both teams missed. Martinez's effort for Barcelona was saved, Cortez diving left, but Morales' attempt was shot right at goalkeeper Contreras. So it was still 3-3 entering the 5th penalty kick round, effectively sudden death. In the 5th round, Paredes scored a goal for Barcelona, and Giacconi converted for Argentinos Juniors. And now entering the 6th round, where the second choice players, the players who were not selected by the managers, had to step up and execute. And the pressure told in the 6th round. Rangel's attempt by Barcelona was saved by Cortez, and Argentinos had an opportunity to win the tie through Roman Riquelme. Unfortunately, Riquelme's effort was high. You could tell that he had tilted his body back as he was executing the penalty kick, and the ball struck the crossbar, so it remained 4-4 between Barcelona and Argentinos Juniors. The 7th penalty kick round was the final round. Solis' attempt was successful for Barcelona, but Eric Godoy, who had the opportunity and the pressure to score for Argentinos, shot his attempt high and wide. Barcelona won the penalty kick shootout 5-4 on penalties. After all the bad blood, after all of the conflict between the players and the leadership of both clubs, after the frustrations of losing the first leg in Guayaquil, Barcelona overcome everything. They win 1-0 on the night, and they advance 5-4 on a 7th round penalty kick shootout. And now moving over to the second featured match of this week between Botafogo and Nacional Potosí of Bolivia. Botafogo made one change and lined up in a 5-4-1 with Leo Link as goalkeeper, Alex Tellez, Alex Barbosa, Bastos, Mateo Ponchi, and Betinho in defense, Alvaro Montoro, Newton, Danilo, surprisingly enough, and Jordan Barrera as midfield, and Mateus Martins as the lone striker. Leonardo Eguis of Nacional Potosí made 4 changes to his side and lined up in a 3-4-2-1 with Pedro Galindo in goal, the 3-man backline of Juan Orellana, Luis Di Miguel, and Edison Restrepo, midfield Maicon Solis, Pedro Azogue, Diego Hoyos, Oscar Baldemar, who scored in the first leg. In the hole between midfield and striker, Leandro Otramin and Jorge Rojas, and it's a lone striker, William Alvarez. Botafogo came out on fire. They were absolutely fantastic in the first half, and they pinned Nacional deep into their own half. Vitinho hit the post in the first minute, and 4 minutes later, they would level the tie on aggregate through Alex Tellez. Tellez was played in beautifully on a long ball over the top by Newton. Tellez raced into the box and chipped Galindo into the net to give Botafogo the 1-0 lead and 1-1 on aggregate. The onslaught continued for Botafogo. Martins hit the post. Betinho hit the post in the 20th minute. 3 more shots between the 20th and 30th minute required saves by the Nacional goalkeeper Galindo. And finally, in the 6th minute of first half stoppage time, Botafogo would find themselves in the lead on aggregate. Another floated free kick into the box this time to Barbosa, was headed across. Nacional couldn't clear their lines, and Danilo was there at the doorstep of the goal to tap in. The second half was much more muted by Botafogo. They were seeking to consolidate their advantage and soak up pressure by the away side. Botafogo, in fact, did not take a shot after the 62nd minute. Nacional were actually pretty close to goal on two occasions. An attempt by Oscar Villalba, a long-range attempt, hit the post about 25 minutes from time. And with 5 minutes left, a header by Azogue found Link's arms. But in the end, it was not enough. Botafogo won 2-0 on the night over Nacional. They advanced 2-1 on aggregate. So those are the two featured matches. So now let's talk about the rest of the second preliminary round. And we start in track 1 with the match between Guarani and Juventude. 2-1 to Juventude. They first scored on an accidentally executed free kick. Guarani equalized on a penalty by their goalkeeper, but their goalkeeper would be the GOAT on a play in the last minute of the match, and not GOAT in the good way. Juventude executed a very well-worked possession. The ball was crossed into the penalty area, and frankly, a mistake by the Guarani goalkeeper allowed the ball to roll in front of the goal line, and Juventude was able to pounce on the ball, turn the ball into the net, and gain a 2-1 lead. And after a goalless draw in Uruguay, it would be Juventude once again who advanced 2-1 on aggregate. You simply cannot underestimate this tiny Uruguayan side. They will face Independiente Medellin. They drew 0-0 with Liverpool. El Dim rode pressure from Liverpool, with Salvador Ichazo being a big presence in goal. They advanced 2-1 on aggregate. In track 3, Sporting Cristal drew 0-0 with Segunda de Mayo in a tense encounter. Sporting dominated the match, but didn't have much to show for it. Segunda de Mayo hit the post on a free kick. The match would eventually go to a penalty kick shootout, and after 6 rounds of penalties, Sporting Cristal would overcome the plucky Paraguayan side 5-4 in penalties. Segunda de Mayo not able to take down the Peruvian side for the second consecutive round. 2 away goals in the first half by Carabobo allowed them to achieve a 2-1 victory over Huachipato in Talcahuano, Chile. It's the first time that a Venezuelan side have beaten a Chilean team in a 2-legged tie of the Copa Libertadores. Carabobo advancing 3-1 on aggregate. Track 2 had all of the drama, had plenty of drama. Bahia was victorious 2-1 over O'Higgins, but it wasn't enough for them to avoid a penalty kick shootout. Bahia went out to a 2-0 lead on a William Jose brace, but O'Higgins would equalize early in the second half on a play that was effectively a delayed penalty. It's not quite called that in soccer like it probably would be in hockey, but that's what it was. It was a call that if the scrambled goal had occurred, probably wouldn't have resulted in a penalty kick call. The tie went to penalty kicks, and Omar Carabali was huge in the shootout for O'Higgins with 2 saves. So O'Higgins of Chile, named after the Chilean father of independence, advanced 4-3 on penalties, and they will be in the third preliminary round. Deportes Tolima hosting Deportivo Táchira. This was a match that was tight. It was 0-0 for most of the match. It looked like Tolima would be able to escape with a narrow 1-0 advantage on aggregate. And then in the final minute of play, Táchira would earn a penalty, and Luis Daniel Gonzalez would convert for Táchira and even the aggregate tie. Unfortunately, all that effort for Táchira would come up, would end in smoke in the penalty kick shootout. Táchira would miss all three of their penalties. Luis Daniel Gonzalez, who converted that critical penalty in normal time, would miss his first kick of the shootout. And Tolima would survive in advance 3-0 on penalties. They only needed 4 rounds to secure their place in the third preliminary round. So that is it from the most dramatic second preliminary round that we've seen in some time. It was a round that featured final minute deciders, 4 penalty kick shootouts, and if you're looking for a Cinderella team to root for, I would submit Juventud de las Piedras, that tiny team from outside of Montevideo, really the only Uruguayan Primera División team that is not in the city of Montevideo. They are the only team from the first preliminary round to advance to the final preliminary stage. So they will be in either the group stage of Libertadores or the group stage of Copa Sudamericana. So now we have the ties for the third preliminary round of the Libertadores. These teams will either appear in the group stage of Libertadores or they will appear in the group stage of Copa Sudamericana. So they will be playing South American football for a good part of this year. And the matches will be between Independiente Medellín and Juventud, Deportivo Tolima versus O'Higgins, Sporting Cristal versus Carabobo, and Botafogo versus Barcelona Sporting Club. The teams mentioned first are the teams that will host the second legs of all of these ties. The specific dates haven't been announced by CONMEBOL, but these matches will be played the week of March 3rd, and with the second legs being played the week of March 10th. We have clubs representing 7 of the 10 CONMEBOL countries: Venezuela, Uruguay, Chile, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, and 2 from Colombia. The only teams not represented: Bolivia, Paraguay, and interestingly enough, Argentina. It's going to be a really dramatic third and final preliminary round. Winning in the preliminary stage really buys you 2 more weeks, but the third preliminary round is special because everyone wants to get there, not just because of the financial riches, but also the prestige of appearing in the Copa Libertadores group stage and having that chance at eternal glory. And you can only get that chance of eternal glory if you appear in the group stage. If you appear in the group stage, you always have a chance. Now, I would say you could find XG maps, flowcharts, and passing network maps for every Libertadores match on my X feed on Soccermetrics, but I've had a problem with my data supplier. The problem is entirely on my end, but once I resolve that, those maps, flowcharts, and passing network maps for Libertadores matches will return. If you have a comment or question about this podcast or the Libertadores, you can send them to my X handle, or you can send comments or questions to Soccer Down Here or to Jason Longshore at Longshoot. This show is also distributed on YouTube and Facebook, and you can follow the conversations there. I'll be back next week to preview the first legs of the Copa Libertadores third preliminary round. This has been the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show, proudly part of the SDH network. See you later, hasta luego, and até mais.